It's officially draft month. And here on the Locked on Buckeyes podcast, we're going to start doing one mock draft every week. Mock draft season is here. It's almost over for this draft cycle. And you know that means we have to bring back Ryan Roberts from RiseandDraft.com. He recently released his mock draft 2.0. There are two Buckeyes going in the first round. Where do they go? What teams do they land on? And how does he view other draft prospects that are coming from the Ohio State University? All that and more right here on Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes, part of Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Tuesday, April 5th in the year 2022, and today's episode is brought to you by Stat Hero. Stat Hero is reshaping the way you play fantasy sports. Dozens of house-based games to play daily. No sharks, no funky props, just your skill versus the lineups you choose. Sign up today at stathero.com/locked on. I would also like to thank everyone out there for making Locked on Buckeyes your first to listen of every single day. Ryan Roberts from RiseandDraft.com is here with us. You can also follow him personally on Twitter at RiseTheLetterInDraft.com. Ryan, no, excuse me, not .com, just at RiseTheLetterInDraft. I'm so used to your Twitter handle and then now your website, which comes from your Twitter handle. You're confusing me, a little tongue-tied. But Ryan, welcome back to the show.
I appreciate you having me back on, Jay. I know it's firmly draft season, man. We're only a couple weeks out, so it's going to get a little hectic here, man. But thank you so much for taking some time to have me on.
Yeah, man, no problem. This is your time of year. I'm not the biggest draft guy. I have no problem saying that. But when I found you on Twitter, I realized that this guy's a little nerd. He's a little crazy. He's gets a little wacky this time of year, and you love every second of it. You and Joe do a phenomenal job with the podcast you guys host, and that's still the only NFL draft solely podcast that I listen to that's all about the draft. Of course, Ryan Russillo does a little draft stuff every now and then, but draft specific only, that's you guys, and I really appreciate the work you guys do.
I appreciate that, man. It's we're coming up. I think this is our second or third cycle doing the podcast, so it's kind of blown by a little bit, man. So I appreciate that support, though, for sure. It's we try to get as many great guests on as possible, as many great prospects on as possible. So appreciate that someone is listening and someone enjoys it.
That is always fun. And Ryan Roberts mock draft 2.0, he went through all 32 picks, gave a little explanation as far as who he has going in what spot. Number one pick for him in this draft goes to Kayvon Thibodeau, defensive end from Oregon. Number two is a guy you guys won't like, going to the Lions, and Aiden Hutchinson, edge defender from Michigan. 3, Kyle Hamilton. 4, Evan Neal. 5, Ecom, I'm not saying his last name, from NC State. Number 6, Charles Cross from Mississippi State, going to the Panthers. Number 7, George Karlaftis, edge rusher defender from Purdue, a guy that I've been high on for a very long time. If he had a little bit more help, it would have looked a whole lot different this year for him. But number 8 for Ryan in his first round mock draft 2.0 in the first round that he did, it's wide receiver Garrett Wilson from The Ohio State University. Ryan, why number 8, and why is this a great fit for him going to Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, this was a really fun mock draft just in general to do because this was not a predictive board, right? If it was predictive, I probably would have given Aiden Hutchinson first overall to Jacksonville just because that's kind of what perceived is to be the reality that we're living in. But I really wanted to go with where if Ryan Roberts was the GM, what I felt like was a good fit. And I was going to throw in a little bit of realism and a little bit of predictive to it. But for the most part, it was going to be where I saw this draft kind of going. And Garrett Wilson, for me, makes the most sense with the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, you're now 2 years removed from Julio Jones leaving the team with Atlanta. The Calvin Ridley saga, obviously, with the gambling and at least a year of suspension. So, I mean, they were in a drastic wide receiver need, even if Calvin Ridley was going to be on this roster. Because if you look at this, I mean, the Atlanta Falcons fans right now are getting excited about Auden Tate coming to Atlanta. Like, that's how bad this wide receiver group is right now. So I sat there at number 8, no trades involved, and I said, I'm going to give the Atlanta Falcons the best wide receiver that I think is on the board and the best wide receiver in this draft in general. That's Garrett Wilson, because I feel like he can do a lot of the things that Calvin Ridley gave to your offense from a route running perspective, from a just ability to work from multiple alignments, and then the really quick twitch fluidness that he brings to the game. But then I think that he's the only wide receiver in this class, and I've been very adamant about this. I think he's the only wide receiver in this class that can win in every single way that you can imagine. We talked about the route running a little bit. He's a good athlete that can win just strictly off of foot quickness and getting in and out of breaks. He's also a guy that I think can win above the rim a little bit. He's a springy athlete with strong hands. He is the only player that I think can win in all those areas and also still have that yak dynamic ability too after the catch. So he's a true 3 level threat. I am a big fan of Garrett Wilson. For me, he is easily a top 10 player in this class, and a wide receiver needy team at pick 8. I feel like he's very worth that pick in a vacuum.
Losing Matt Ryan for the Falcons is huge. He's been there for 10 plus years. I don't know the exact length of his tenure, but at least 10 plus years he's been there in Atlanta, been the guy. Unfortunately, the 28-3, we all remember that Super Bowl and how that utter collapse and embarrassment of what happened in the second half of that game. Of course, you may say that wasn't all on Matt Ryan. It could have been coaching, but still, he's on the field, and it's Matt Ryan. He can audible if he needs to be able to make the right play and call the right plays to make sure the Falcons are staying on the field, scoring the football, things like that, so they win that game. But you have him in the top 10, and I'm going to round out the top 10 here really quickly. Number 9, Ryan has Trayvon Walker from Georgia, edge defender, edge rusher. The number 10, Drake London from USC, wide receiver, going to the New York Jets. And I think that's very interesting because I've seen a lot of debate. Drake London over Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams maybe over Garrett Wilson. I saw somebody recently say Chris Olave over Garrett Wilson. You've been a person that has been all along saying that Garrett Wilson is wide receiver 1. And you were in that statement. You were saying that very thing prior to this past season even being played. Why have you stuck with Garrett Wilson? You kind of went with it a little bit, but Drake London's good. Olave is good. Jamison Williams is good. These are all good players, but you still have stuck with GW, as I call him, at wide receiver 1. Why?
It's a great question. I feel like there's merit to every one of those wide receivers. It's a really good wide receiver group just in general, to be honest. Because if you want a guy that's just the most dynamic weapon of the group, the guy that can really stretch the defense, then you can make an argument that Jamison Williams is your guy. If you want the big body pass catcher, Drake London, maybe Treylon Burks if you want a little more of a yak guy, considering in that mold. And I've talked to people, Jay, and I mean, I guess it's a little insights. I'm a very strong opinion right now from around the league that Garrett Wilson and Drake London are going to be the first 2 wide receivers off the board. What that mix is, it could be dependent, because I also know that Atlanta likes Drake London a ton. They do. I think the number 10 for the Jets, their second round pick, is absolutely going to be a wide receiver. And they also like Drake London. So I think those 2 are going to be the first 2 off the board. And obviously that is because Jamison Williams is also injured. I think if he wasn't injured, then he might be in the wide receiver 1 conversation. But the reason, again, that I have always valued Garrett Wilson to this degree over a guy like Drake London, it's because when you kind of departmentalize these wide receivers, I'm going to start with Drake London. Drake London is a guy that can win in the air, he can win with physicality, and he can win after the catch. But he's also 6'4" plus, 219 pounds. He's not going to win as a route runner a ton. So there's a couple ways that he can create separation, but there's one that he absolutely cannot. Jamison Williams is a guy that can win just with straight athleticism. He can run by you. There's no doubt about it. He can also, I think, a little more nuanced as a route runner than people give him credit for. So that's 2 ways that he can create separation. But he's not the physical catch point guy. Like, he's not going to be that one-on-one contested catch type of wide receiver, and that's fine. And this is not a negative at all, but this is the point to saying that I think Garrett Wilson is the only receiver that can do all of it. There's not like a 1-2 ways that he can win separation. I've not seen a way where I don't think that he could win at the next level. So I think that each of these receivers have their 1 to 2 spots where they really excel, but I think Garrett Wilson just across the board is the most well-rounded receiver in this class.
We're here with Ryan Roberts from riseindraft.com, also the NFL Draft Prospects podcast. Him and Joe DeLeon do a phenomenal job with that podcast. Not only do you have Garrett Wilson going at number 8, but you have at number 27, Chris Olave going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And before I go any further with that, I want to drop down a little bit because, Ryan, a lot of people have put Chris Olave going to number 18 to the New Orleans Saints. And I've seen a lot of mock drafts with that. You have Treylon Burks going to the Saints. I don't really care if he goes 18, 27, 35, 40. I don't really care. I thought he was a second-round draft pick throughout the season just because of – I think his frame still kind of hurts him a little bit, really, really slender. But you have him at 27, different than the 18 where I've seen a lot of people have Olave going. But 27 is still a phenomenal place to go. You're going the top 32 of all NFL prospects that's going to be 250 draft picks. I mean, we're differing over what, 8, 9 picks, 10 picks? Like, that's not a bad spot. You're still a first-rounder. Great for Olave. Going to the Buccaneers, Tom coming back. I mean, this isn't a bad fit for him at all.
Now, I love the fit, and just to really quickly glance to the Treylon Burks fit for a second, the reason I went Treylon earlier than Chris Olave is just because I think he has more upside, right? And both guys, I think, win in a couple different ways. Treylon is the big physical yak receiver who I think also can, he can win in the air, but I think his foot quickness is definitely good enough to win in that area too, just as a pure athlete. I don't think he's not going to be a great route runner just because he's a little tight. He's 225 pounds. Like, it's just not going to be his bag. But Chris Olave, on the other sense, is a great route runner, athletic, can run by some guys, but also, like you said, the play strength is not great. He's never going to be a guy that's going to win with physicality down the field. Like, that's just not going to be his bag either. So each of those guys win in multiple ways. I just think Treylon has more of an upside to being a true number one receiver, like a true volume receiver. I have always been on the sense that, like, hey, man, I really like Chris Olave for what he is. Like I said, he's an easy separator. He has really good foot quickness. He's got good speed. Everything is good. He catches the ball consistently. I just don't see number one receiver in his profile. I see a really good secondary option. And in this fit, I love this fit personally. You had Mike Evans, who, of course, is that big boundary receiver who can win down the field with his length and his speed. You have Chris Godwin, who's kind of move all over the place, but he's going to do a lot of things in the slot as well. When Tampa Bay was at its best last season, they had Antonio Brown before the Antonio Brown saga went haywire. I think Chris Olave profiles to that spot very well because I think he's a really good route runner. I think he can win with some athleticism, and their attention's not going to be all about him. You're not going to just say, we need to shut down that Chris Olave. That's the only receiver they have. In this situation, people are going to say Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Oh, damn. Now we also have to stop a guy like Chris Olave. He's a secondary pass catcher, but I think he's a high-volume secondary pass catcher in this offense specifically. And with Tom Brady unretiring after only a couple weeks, which is just, we can talk about that off the air a little bit. But, I mean, obviously they're all in on, like, hey, we got to make one final run here. Let's give Tom another weapon. Chris Olave, I think he's an instant offense type of player. Again, don't think the ceiling is incredibly high, but he gives you such a high floor that I think he's going to come in even as a rookie, and I think he's going to become a pretty consistent playmaker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I think there aren't many places you'll go in the NFL where you have a quarterback that is like Tom Brady. I'm not even talking about the rings. He's been at a couple spots. He's had different coaches. He's seen how the NFL has transformed and changed it to what it is today versus what it was in the early 2000s when he won 3 or 4 championships. That was a defensive-led Patriots team. You can tell me whatever you want about Tom Brady. That defense won things for them in New England. Yes, Tom Brady has transformed and he has evolved as a quarterback, but he's seen so many different styles of defense. He's seen a physical, very physical NFL. He's seen a soft NFL. He has seen ways that he can manipulate the rules, manipulate referees because of the way things that are called today. And I think, Ryan, he can help Olave, if this is where he goes, to kind of get acclimated to the NFL. You know, Tom has a family. Tom has things that he has going on. But Tom's all about his business. He cares about being a top quarterback in the NFL. And Olave going to a place like – let's say he is in Tampa. That's phenomenal because you have that veteran leadership from not just from the quarterback, but also from the wide receivers. You have guys that have played in the NFL that have been there for a long time in coaching. You have Bruce Arians, who is now in the front office, and that whole situation is still weird to me as well, the way that he got up there and how they know the rule book better than we know the rule book, which is, of course, important because that date, I think it was March 1st or whatever date it was very pivotal into how Todd Bowles became the next head coach and the timing of everything going down. But if he goes to New Orleans, I don't even know who the quarterback is going to be. Is it Jameis Winston? Like, I have the problem with that. I get it, but I'd rather play for Tom Brady at, 48,000 years old versus Jameis Winston. I'd rather have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin than a guy, not knocking Michael Thomas, who's a Buckeye in himself, but he didn't even play. I don't know the last time he played football. So you're getting some weird things going on there. Olave to Tampa Bay. I like it for Olave's sake because it's going to help him get his feet wet in a great way in the NFL. I love this move. He may play slot, may play outside. I don't know all the minute details about his lining up on the field, but I think that this is a great spot for Chris Olave, especially when he's going to be a rookie, and this is a whole different animal than playing at Ohio State.
Yeah, and I think kind of with the conversation between Burks versus Olave that I talked about a little bit, it's also the fact of, like you said, the Saints are in a transitional period now.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know who the quarterback is. They have Dennis Allen coming in as their head coach with Sean Payton stepping down. So they are not, this is not a ready-made team where quick turnarounds, we're going to compete for a Super Bowl next year. Like, that's not going to happen. So that's why I opted for what I could perceive to be the higher upside with the Treylon Burks. But in the other spectrum, Tampa Bay is ready to win. Like, they can make a final run here. And Chris Olave is a little more ready to go type of player. He might not be the higher upside compared to a Treylon Burks, but he gives you a substantial floor that he's going to come in. I think he's going to be a really successful and productive player early. And like you said, working with guys like Chris Godwin's one of the better route runners in the NFL. I think that's going to help him tremendously kind of moving along. Playing with Tom Brady is going to be tremendous for him as well. I really think that when you look at Tampa Bay's roster, I mean, I was thinking defensive end maybe at the end of the first round, but they just drafted the kid from Washington last year whose name I always forget his name for whatever reason. I wasn't the biggest fan of him, but they just drafted him in the first round last year. And you kind of look at it and you're just like, are they going to double dip again? They could at defensive end because it does matter, but I mean, they have a great linebackers. Secondary is good with Antoine Winfield Jr. and Carlton Davis. The defensive line has some dudes up there with Vita Vea and all those guys. The offensive line is good. They just got Jensen back. They saw Donovan Smith, and they have Tristan Wirfs, one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL. They have Tom Brady. They have wide receivers. They have Leonard Fournette coming back. Like, there's just not a lot of holes in this roster. They are ready to go. So getting a guy like Olave that I think is an admiration in the end of the first round, because you don't usually get guys that can come in and just contribute right away. I think he can do that.
We're here with Ryan Roberts from RiseandDraft.com. Ryan, we're going to go to some guys that are not in the first round. I don't need to round out where everybody else is going in the first round of your mock draft. Let's go to a couple tackles. We're going to try to do this a little bit quicker than with the previous two guys. Nicholas Petit-Frere, we're going to call him NPF to kind of move along quickly. Long first and last name. Then Thayer Munford. Where do you think these two tackles go? I know they're not in the first round of this mock draft. I wasn't really expecting either of them to go there. But where do you think they fall?
I think NPF ends up going somewhere day 2, just based upon everything I'm hearing. I've been honest with you about this one, Jay. I am really hesitant on Petit-Frere, man. I really am, because I think that his foot quickness is good, and I think he's got length, obviously 34-inch arms, and that stuff's all well and good, but I'm worried about his body type, because I feel like the more weight he put on during his career just kind of zapped his foot quickness a little bit. So I'm really worried about him just holding a decent amount of weight, and I just don't think that he was developed properly. But there are tools, and there is a lot of starting experience at Ohio State, and he's played right tackle and left tackle. So I think that's going to appeal to a lot of people, and I think that he's going to go somewhere on day 2. Thayer Munford, I think he might have a little bit of a slide, man, because he played left tackle a lot at Ohio State, obviously. I think he projects better at guard, which he played this past season. That versatility will help him a little bit, but, man, he went to the combine, and I thought he just looked very unathletic. He looks heavy-footed right now. Like, I'm just struggling a little bit with Thayer Munford as well. I think he goes somewhere on day 3, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's a guy that slides a little bit. And like you're looking at, you're like, wow, Thayer Munford only went in the 6th or 7th round. At some points, going in from the summer, I think some people were talking to themselves into like, hey, this could be a 3rd or 4th round pick. But I just really don't think he had a great season. I think he's a guard only at the next level. I know he played some offensive tackle, obviously, in the beginning of his career, but I just don't think he's athletic enough to play the spot.
Jeremy Ruckert, where you got him going? Day 2, day 3?
So I would draft him day 3 just because I think that he has a lot of upside to him, but I think there is a lot of projection, right? And it's not all his fault because Ohio State just has not used the tight end position enough, in my opinion. So I think that, but I do think you see a solid linear athlete. I think you see really good hands. I think that you see blocking upside at the position, but you don't see a ton of production. So I would say 4th to 5th round is a good spot for him. But I am here to tell you that this tight end class after Trey McBride is all over the place, man. Like it's Cade Otton, it's Isaiah Likely, Jalen Weidermeyer just had one of the worst pro day showings of all time out of Texas A&M. So you could sell me that he might be a day 2 player because he might be the 3rd tight end off the board just because he's the cleanest prospect from a size, strength, upside perspective. So I think he ends up probably going somewhere on day 2. But I think that that's more the fact that I think there's a lot of uncertainty with how this pecking order of tight ends falls after the tight end 1.
You say you think he goes day 2, not day 3?
Yeah, I think he ends up going day 2. I would draft him day 3, Jay, just because I think 4th, 5th round is more that parlays to like a developmental tight end in this sense. But I think that he goes day 2 just because I think, again, after Trey McBride, who I think has kind of cemented himself as the first tight end off the board out of Colorado State, like I think there's going to be some guys that really like Isaiah Likely. I think there's some guys that are going to like Cade Otton, even though he's coming off the injury. I think there's some guys that are still going to talk themselves into Jalen Weidermeyer. There's going to be different guys, but I think that there's a lot of fans around the NFL for Ruckert with the upside he has. So I think he goes maybe probably more 3rd round, but I wouldn't be shocked if he sneaks in the 2nd round ultimately.
Going to combine these next 2 because I'm going to combine 2 more players in the next draft cycle. One I hinted at earlier. The other one is big man on campus. Don't have to say his name. Where do you got Tyreke Smith and Haskell Garrett? Day 2 or day 3?
Both day 3 players. I think Haskell is – I really like Haskell Garrett. I think that someone's going to get a value on day 3 because there's nothing flashy about him, right? Like he's a undersized, not great arm length, not great athlete, but he just makes plays ultimately. And he's got a good first step and he just understands how to attack leverage. And I think that he's going to give a team a lot of production as a backup at the next level. So I'll say he goes somewhere on day 3, probably 5th to 6th rounds. Tyreke Smith, I feel the same way about. He's a little different because I think there's a little more projection with upside because I think that he does have some flashes where you're like, oh, that's nice. Like there's some flexibility there. There's some bend, flashes, speed, the power. You're like, okay, I could work with that. And you saw some kind of the same thing with his testing. He didn't run incredibly fast from the 40, but the broad jump was good. The vertical was good. Like everything was just around, everywhere. 3-cone, short shuttle. Like he was just a good, solid tester. So I think someone's going to take a gamble on him somewhere on the midday 3 because I think that there is more upside than maybe has been tapped into just because he's been in a crowded defensive end room during the course of his career.
There's a quarterback. First name, we call him CJ. Last name, Stroud. He's been a phenomenal player to watch. Had a little rough start. Of course, it's expected when you're starting your first few college football games. There's going to be some rough patches. You're playing Oregon in week number 2 that has good guys at the first level, second level, third level that kind of confused you. Like, I get it. It happens. It's football. People are freaking out, saying, oh, he should be benched. Like, I understand the hesitation. But as this young man got his feet wet, as he progressed throughout the season, we saw that Stroud is a phenomenal football player, and he does things as a redshirt freshman. And Ryan said previously, off air, he may share those again, that I don't think many guys that even at his tenure or even a second-year guy that's been playing a 2-year starter, most guys aren't doing some of the things. They don't have some of the tools that CJ Stroud has. Where do you see Stroud next year? No, I won't even say like where you – I know where you have him this year. It's kind of QB1. I'll say it for you. QB1 in this year's draft if he was able to come out.
Yeah.
But from your little – film watching of next year's prospects started a little bit early.
Yep.
Do you see Stroud getting drafted before Bryce Young?
Man, it's a really difficult conversation because, first and foremost, I got done a little bit earlier this year. There's just going to be some guys I'm not going to do full write-ups with, but tight end, the quarterback group, in this year's class, Jay, was not good, right? So I wanted to get into some quarterbacks early on. I did get the opportunity to watch CJ. I watched the first 2 games of the season, and then I watched the last game against Utah.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
The differences between the early games to the end of the year, man, that Utah game was one of the better games I've seen of a quarterback. Maybe the best quarterback game I've seen this cycle. Even if you count guys that are going into the 2022 draft, like he was phenomenal, man. And from a physical perspective, real quick, like 6'3", 210, 215, somewhere in that ballpark. He's got the size. That's a check. Arm strength, I think, is plus. It's good. I wouldn't say he's got an elite arm strength, but like it's good. And he can throw from multiple platforms, and he has really good touch on his deep ball and intermediate ball. So I'm like, cool, that stuff's all great. Good athlete, solid athlete. I wouldn't say he's a great athlete. I would say he's a but he moves well in the pocket and he can extend some plays, but he's not a runner, obviously. And that's fine. You don't need to be. Like, I need you to move well in the pocket. I need you to have some pocket awareness. The things that you teach are, I mean, honestly, man, like people work years and years and years in the pocket with the feel of the game, and they don't have this natural feel that a guy like a CJ Stroud has as a redshirt freshman. It's rare. It's not normal because I see him in the pocket and just like subtle movements. It's just insane. And then we were talking before the show, and like just his understanding of where things are going to uncover and just being ahead of, a tick ahead of everybody and having kind of that internal clock. It's just very rare stuff, man. It's very rare. So you're talking about good physical tools all the way around with an advanced understanding of how to play the quarterback position. I haven't watched enough of Bryce right now, but I know that Bryce, just kind of from a, just live watching is really, he has kind of some of the same things. Like he has a natural kind of understanding of how to play position. He's a very accurate player, but CJ's a bigger kid, stronger arm. So I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. I think that there's going to be a lot of people that like CJ Stroud more than Bryce Young. I think there's going to be some people that claim to Bryce Young. I'm okay with either side right now. All I'll say is CJ Stroud would be easily the first quarterback get drafted in 2022 if he was eligible.
Last but not least, I said big man on campus on purpose. DeJuan Jones, right? You know where I live, Indianapolis, Indiana. DeJuan Jones played high school football literally 10 minutes from where I live. Ironically, I saw him play more basketball games in high school than football games on the basketball court. I mean, this big man had footwork that you don't see guys that are 300 pounds, 250. Yeah. Like, if you cut off 100 pounds on him and guys that are in high school or college, his footwork was better than them, and it was fun to watch. But DeJuan Jones is a hefty human being. And I'm not trying to be funny when I say that. I mean, he's hefty. He's huge. He'll tell you that. Like, 6'8", 360. You cannot hide or kind of put behind a little small kind of cover and say, oh, who is that guy? Well, he's sticking out on both sides. DeJuan Jones from Ohio State. How can he improve throughout the season to be a day one draft pick?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will say I had the opportunity to talk with him before, Jay, and he told me that he liked basketball more than football, yeah. And it was just like one of those things where you're 6'7", 6'8" kid, like what's the upside with, maybe playing in the NBA comparative to playing offensive tackle on the NFL level? Like it makes total sense. DeJuan immediately sticks out because like you said, 6'8", 360, there just aren't a lot of people that size. And he's got long arms and he's just a massive dude. They literally moved Thayer Mumford inside because DeJuan Jones was too good to leave off the field. And the best parts of him are awesome, man. Like there are some upside to him in the run game, especially where you're just like, holy, like it doesn't make any sense. Like it's insane. And then in pass protection, he's a hard guy to get around. Just first and foremost, he's 6'8", 360. How he can make a step, though, and I think that he would have been a draftable player even if he would have declared this year, but how he takes the next step to being a top, 64 type of player, a top 100 type of player, is I really do think that he may need to lose a little bit of weight, to be honest with you. Because I think that the flexibility is not great. Like, I don't think it is. I think there's going to be some limitations to him against pure outside track speed rushers, which is very understandable because, again, the guy is massive. But I really do think that, again, if you watch the best of him, you see the flashes of foot quickness. And then you watch the basketball highlights of him coming out of high school. Like, obviously, he's a gifted athlete.
Yes.
I think more about him is just, let's get ourselves in great shape. Let's improve our flexibility because there is massive upside there. There is absolutely no doubt about it. I just think that the size that he plays at right now may just limit a little bit of the flexibility he has.
Ryan, this has been fun, man. Got you a little bit earlier than expected due to the timing of your mock draft coming out. I wanted to try to be the first one to hop on, one of the first few people to hop on and get you on record talking about some of the things that you put down on paper on the internet as well. If you could, Ryan, for really quickly, let everyone know where they can catch you on Twitter and also where they can catch some of the great things you guys are doing at Rise and Draft Scouting.
Yeah. Like you said in our intro, I try to keep it as easy as possible. So it's Rise and Draft, RASEN Draft on Twitter. You can follow everything I'm doing on there as far as content from recruiting all the way up to the NFL draft, especially during draft season. RiseandDraft.com. Keep it as easy as possible. We have Mock Draft Simulator, podcasts, daily content coming out from article perspective. There'll be some more mock drafts, there's scouting reports, there's consulting if you're an agent out there. So a little bit of everything, RiseandDraft.com. We try to keep it a one-stop shop for all the draft nerds out there.
And guys, I will tell you this: I may be planning to go do a little looking and scouting at the enemy prior to the matchup week number 1 of the upcoming season. Ryan let me know before we started recording that Notre Dame's spring game is literally the week after Ohio State's. I'm planning on being at Ohio State spring game. The plan is to also possibly be at Notre Dame spring game as well. So Ryan and I may actually meet for the first time in doing shows for 2 to 3 years together. It's like, so great. This nerd guy that does Notre Dame stuff and does draft stuff, we might actually meet for the first time, which is great. If you're going to be at Ohio State spring game, a little early look at that, feel free to reach out to me at jstevens07. My DMs are always open. Email me, jstevens317@gmail.com. I would love to meet you. I'll take a picture. I don't care. If you want to tweet it out, great. I don't mind. I'll just love to meet some people that listen to the show, watch the show on the YouTube, and have a good old time watching football. So if I come on the podcast the week of the draft and start talking about Notre Dame and some things I saw early in the spring game, it's because I saw Ryan at the Notre Dame spring game and got a little early look at the Fighting Irish. Guys, I could talk all day. It's a Tuesday. Mock draft season is here. Ryan gave us a lot of information on guys this year and guys next year as well. For the meantime, we're out of here for the day. I'll be back tomorrow. Ryan has a busy life with the family, and we'll just keep rolling along with Buckeye Talk all week long.